All right, so let's start talking about the different product categories that RTT offers that you manufacture. So the first one would be filters, and then you would get to sheet metal, and then surface prep. So let's hold off for a minute on the filters, and we're gonna make that as kind of its own thing later. Let's talk about sheet metal. So give us an overall bird's eye picture of the product lines under sheet metal.
Okay. Yeah, so in our sheet metal side, we kind of look at it in two segments. Is we have what we call our core equipment, catalog equipment, and then we have what we would do our engineered type equipment. Okay. And like the core equipment and even the engineered equipment, you have the same components, right? So we have spray booths, paint booths for liquid coatings, powder booths, pass through, reclaim booths, spray to waste type booths. We do all the curing ovens and the dry ovens and things like that for wet paint, powder coat, some other special applications sometime. And then some of our major other products are, like you said, the surface prep, which would be like parts washers, inline washers, manual wash booths, some blast, sanding. We don't necessarily build the reclaim equipment for the blast booths, but we do the booth shells and that apparatus. And we have some partners that we team with to give solutions for customers, but we mostly focus on the enclosures and the air movement for those. And that pretty much kind of broad scope of all the product lines. We do air handling equipment, air makeup units, temperature, humidity controlled, regular spray or spray cure, all that type of environment, And like I say, on the engineered side of that, we would take into process equipment, where a customer is looking to do a full scope with all those different components. Sometimes, you have to grow that standard product, right? Or a very large enclosure or large booth. If a customer needs a 80-foot wide booth and 40-foot tall and 300-foot long, you could say it's a core product because we have booths that are designed that way. But when you get that large, you really have to start thinking about the engineering of it.
Airflow is everything.
That's
so
right,
when you're putting a booth together, the bigger space that you have to have, the more you really have to look at airflow. Like, how truly are we going to take away? If you have one spray gun or an automatic gun in the middle of this booth, and it triggers on, or two guns, whatever, and you trigger on, how are you going to get that overspray from the middle of that room all the way to the filter wall? Secondly, how are you going to get that out of the center of the room without disturbing the airflow at the workpiece to where you're causing issues on the application side?
That's right.
So it's a giant task.
It is, and like you mentioned the airflow, and it's all part related. What is being coated? What does the part look like? You mentioned about overspray and things like that, and we see it all the time. A customer will order a really large booth, and their parts are really small, and they just put a bunch of them in there. And it kind of like, that for airflow purposes, that's kind of tough, and we have to think through that to try to offer the best solution. Because you could just buy a cookie cutter booth from us or from a competitor, anyone that has that, but your application is at the right one, and that's where we take that side of the business and kind of go that exercise. Can we create a better mousetrap, than what is our standard product?
Right. We often talk about the open-faced booths that are well known in the industry. They're supposed to have doors, but there's a lot of people that are like, well, that cost me an extra few $1,000 for the doors.
Right.
We'll just go ahead and do without the doors. And we often talk about how the walls on these booths, they're like Legos. You can keep adding on, like director sets or whatever, And so somebody that's getting started in the business thinks it's a good idea to buy a budgetary booth, a small get started type booth. And when they do that, it comes with a certain fan size.
Mm-hmm.
And the fan is 100% of the draw for your airflow. Okay? And you know that, I know that. We're just going over it. So, year, 2 years down the path, the customer is going, you know what? I want to be able to put bigger parts in here. Their business is growing. They're making modifications. So they either call back to the vendor of it and say, I want to order more panels to build out. And sometimes the discussion happens of, well, maybe you should think about that fan also, fan motor, fan blade, and but oftentimes it doesn't. They just sell them and go. And then we start getting calls as, a distributor or the paint powder companies start getting calls that things are not working right in the booth and the application's not working right. And it's because a lot of times those booths then cannot keep up with the airflow, the draw, to get that excess paint or powder out of the air and into the filter wall because there's not enough draw. So it's really good to work with quality companies that understand, the value of building it right. Building it right and building it right the first time. And if you're going to make modifications, understand that you have to pay attention to both ends of the booth. Mm-hmm. The fan is, if you're coming out this way, you're going to have to think about what the fan's going to do, how that's going to impact you. So, super common problems. Now, if they put a lot of those companies, if they'd had the doors on the booth, there's less impact sometimes. Sometimes more if the booth doors have the filters in them.
Right.